This week on Quadriga, debt crisis, Europe's fate in Berlin's hands. The leaders of Germany and France have proposed a joint economic governance body for the eurozone. They also want a debt ceiling introduced in eurozone countries, but Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy are steering clear of eurobonds, at least for now. Will the measures they've proposed be enough? Chancellor Merkel's handling of the crisis has been sharply criticized in recent weeks, both at home and abroad. Many say she's been too hesitant and should become much more engaged. After all, Germany is Europe's largest economy by far. Your host this week is Terry Martin.
Hello and welcome. Should Germany be doing more to address the European debt crisis? Could the Franco-German proposals actually fix the underlying problems? And why are eurobonds so controversial? Those are some of the questions we're talking about this week on Quadriga.
Joining Terry Martin in the studio, Frank-Paul Weber is foreign editor and Germany correspondent for the French business daily La Tribune. He has reported extensively on European monetary policy, having spent several years covering the activities of the European Central Bank. Quentin Peel is the international affairs editor of the Financial Times. Having served as the FT's bureau chief in Brussels, he's been tracking Europe's development for decades and is currently based in Berlin. Heike Goebbel is an economics editor with Germany's Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. She writes regularly about European economic policy and Germany's role in the eurozone.
So Chancellor Merkel and President Sarkozy get together for a couple of hours in Paris on Tuesday, walk out in front of the press and make these grand announcements with huge proposals. Four main points coming out of this proposal. I'm just going to review them very quickly. A Eurozone economic governance body. Some are calling it a European economic government. There's some discussion about that. Constitutional debt ceilings for each of the Eurozone member countries. Corporate tax harmonization, starting with Germany and France, and a financial transaction tax that may apply to all of Europe, maybe even London. Who knows? Well, Heike, how do you see all these proposals? Do you consider them a major breakthrough, as one conservative politician in the German Bundestag described them, or as a red herring?
It's certainly not a major breakthrough. It's more a red herring, and it is designed, I think, to buy some more time for governments to find a way out of this crisis. Of course, there are some of the proposals like a better debt ceiling, which we can talk about, but we had a debt ceiling before in the European Growth and Stability Pact. There's another thing, the transaction tax. I don't know what this has got to do with the crisis we have on hand. So I think it's more of a red herring.
Frank-Paul Weber, you were there in Paris at the press conference. What do you make of it? These not just the proposals, but also this Franco-German clinch. Do you think that Angela Merkel and Sarkozy are on the same page?
Well, at least they need each other. So that's the main reason, I suppose, for this whole harmony about what they announced. On the French side, the position of Sarkozy has much more to do with French politics than with Europe or the debt crisis per se. It's Sarkozy is using right now all this crisis to show that he's the leader. He can address the issues of the debt and so on, and he has a good understanding with a European leader like Angela Merkel. And so for him, it's very useful to have this image of compromise, even if, as Mrs. Goebbels said, it's well, basically, it's not very new. Most of the proposals, or we could have a lot of questions about it.
Okay, we also have an election coming up very soon in France, so there is maybe a bit of political grandstanding going on behalf of the French president. Quentin Peel, what was your reaction to what came out? Were you surprised? Anything new in these proposals? Really?
No, there was practically nothing new in them. I mean, the insane thing about this meeting was that actually the markets principally the markets, the media a little bit, all raised expectations about some great initiative coming out. And there was a lot of speculation about would they actually give a green light to eurobonds so that countries like Greece or Italy could actually suddenly borrow at rather lower interest rates because effectively their bonds would be guaranteed by Germany. There was never any way that they were going to decide this. I think essentially they went into this meeting with Mr. Sarkozy wanting simply to get a nice endorsement from Frau Merkel saying you're doing all right in France, and Mr. Sarkozy was going to give Frau Merkel a nice endorsement to say don't worry, no Eurobonds for the foreseeable future. The question is whether their ideas about European government or economic government are actually serious. If they are, I think they're very worrying. If they're not serious, then we can forget about it.
You say that they're worrying. Why are they worrying?
They're trying to set up a new structure, really, in parallel to the European Union structure. They want to have new secretariat, they want to have new people supporting a eurozone, summit meetings and so on, and they're going to completely sideline the European Commission. I mean, this has been described to me as gaullism gone mad.
But the European Council President Herman van Rompuy has been proposed as the potential president of this new economic governance body that the French and German leaders are talking about. That's not really sidestepping the European Union, is it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. This is going back to individual countries deciding everything without the European institutions, if you like, whereby all the proposals will come from Paris or Berlin. And it's just a whole new bureaucracy. We don't need it.
Well, and especially Herman van Rompuy is not seen as someone with a very strong personality, so at the moment it is not a threat to the governments, and I think that's why they choose him.
It seems that's why he was chosen as council president and not someone like Tony Blair, a very charismatic figure to begin with. Francois, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, one of the points that I think from the point of view of the financial markets, it's a very strange idea because already the problem is to say who is talking when we are, who is the guy answering the phone when we want to talk to Europe, from Japan to the US and China, and you already had Mr. Euro, Mr. Trichet. You have Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the finance minister of the Eurogroup, and then you will have Herman van Rompuy. But as Heike Goebbels said, Herman van Rompuy he has no weight. Basically, it should be Mr. Sarkozy and Mrs. Merkel. So at the end, who's talking for Europe? And what kind of policy they will have?
Well, that's an interesting question because we know it in relation to European foreign policy. The big question, who do we call from the United States, for example, when we want to talk to Europe? There is no real common foreign policy coming out of Europe yet. And there's no common economic or fiscal policy in Europe underlying the common European currency. Some feel that this is a fundamental flaw in Europe, and that if you did have some common economic governance, at least within the eurozone countries, that this would address this fundamental discrepancy. Is that not a prospect for better governance in Europe?
I think we're moving inevitably in that direction, that there has got to be ever closer integration on economic policy setting. The framework will get narrower and narrower for individual countries to go their own way. The question is how we do that. And my worry about this particular suggestion is they're trying to say it's economic government, but actually the structure isn't going to work. And we need to reinforce something within the European Union. And this immediately becomes very difficult because you're going to have ever closer economic integration for the eurozone, 17 countries, and then you've got 10 countries on the outside who won't be following entirely the same rules. And that could put huge strains on the single market that we're supposed to have in Europe.
And there we get back to the possibility of a two-speed Europe with respect to integration. Okay, another topic of one of those 4 points that they made, a financial transaction tax. Now, we've heard a lot about that before. I remember the G20 preparatory meeting here in Berlin a year ago before going on to the G20 meeting in Toronto, and it was just dismissed right away. It was very clear that that was not going to go anywhere. What to make of that? Why was that even on the table in Paris? Is that a realistic suggestion that people are really thinking about?
I think people are really thinking about it, but I'm still not sure if we'll have or we'll see one in the near future, because it makes more sense if the more countries join in. I think the idea is getting some money out of it and showing your people that you do something against the banks. But that's a bad timing, I think, because banks are still struggling, at least some of them. And if you sort of punish them with the financial transaction tax, it's doing them harm without helping solving the European sovereign debt crisis. So it's a peculiar way to start this thing now.
Frank Weber, do you see a lot of support for a financial transaction tax? Any chance of it being implemented?
Well, in France, there's kind of support about it. I think Sarkozy talked about it quite early. But the strange thing is that what to do with the money they will get with this transaction. I think, if I'm not wrong, in the beginning they were talking about using it to help developing countries. And afterward, the Commission, I think, came with the idea, we could take some money to have more money for the European budget. And right now, this is this French-German idea. I suppose not to give more money to the Commission, but to give maybe more money to Greece or somewhere. So it's very strange why they are doing it. And, well, as you said, the consequences for the banks are maybe not that easy to predict.
I mean, I suspect it's just not going to happen at the end of the day. The only logic is for it to happen at a global level. Otherwise, you change the playing field and Europe will make itself much less attractive for financial services to come. The British are not going to let it happen unless it's global. Is it going to happen just at the eurozone level instead of the European-wide level? I mean, we've heard already instantly in Germany, everybody saying, no way, unless the British are involved. So I think it's a slightly spurious thing. And actually, I think the only reason for this is, one, they wanted to be seen to be doing something about the financial markets. And there is one argument for this, that if you put even a tiny tax on some transactions in the markets, you might discourage the most speculative trades, like these 3-second, microsecond trades that go on.
Okay, we're going to get on to eurobonds in just a moment, but I do want to talk for just a second about the corporate tax harmonization proposal. Is that going to happen? Germany and France suddenly saying, okay, we'll do it, and everyone else should join us, and we'll harmonize our tax proposals. We don't like the fact that Ireland, for example, has a very low corporate tax rate, and that's unfair.
I think they have been talking, especially Germany and France have been talking about that for quite some time now, and we were talking about harmonization, the tax base, but at the moment they are talking about both, the whole tax level. I think that's very dangerous, and it's not going to happen, especially because you need, if you do it, you need all the other countries join in, at least after some time, and I don't see it.
Could France and Germany perhaps set a good example, get the ball rolling, as it were?
Well, actually, on the European level, if I'm not wrong, they are working on it for at least 10 years. So
the European Commission really wants it.
You've seen the results so far. The interesting thing is that at the press conference with Mr. Sarkozy and Mrs. Merkel, the letter they released the day after to Mr. van Rompuy, which includes this idea of corporate tax harmonization, they are writing together harmonizing the tax rate and the tax base. And Mrs. Merkel was asked at the press conference, will it be tax rate and tax base harmonization? And she only answered, yeah, I think about the tax base. So this is one already, because France wants to harmonize also the tax rate. I'm not sure.
It's a French national interest, because Sarkozy wants to change his corporate tax system, and it's using a nice cover to say we're doing it for Europe and doing it with Germany. And I think Germany doesn't really have anything like the same interest in doing it.
If he wants, he can just adopt the German system. It's not too bad at the moment. At least that corporate tax is not too bad. There are some things which I wouldn't adopt, but some are good.
Many are looking to Germany to show more leadership. And Germany, as Europe's largest economy, obviously has a certain amount of weight and responsibility, particularly within the eurozone. France does too, as the second largest economy in the eurozone. But Germany is under particular pressure. Chancellor Merkel has been criticized for her sluggish reaction to the crisis. and for not showing more solidarity, perhaps, with her European eurozone partners. Let's take a quick review of the German response to the eurozone crisis.
In March 2010, Chancellor Merkel rejected the idea of a debt bailout for Greece. Instead, she talked about throwing heavily indebted states out of the eurozone if they didn't clean up their act. That tough talk went down well in Germany. Nonetheless, just 2 months later, Germany's Bundestag approved 20 billion euros in loan guarantees for Greece. And then, 2 weeks after that, signed off on a rescue fund for other shaky eurozone countries. Germany's contribution, 150 billion euros. In July of last year, Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble tried to reassure everyone that the measures were temporary. 8 months later, EU leaders agreed to a permanent rescue mechanism.
Heike, first Germany says, no. Then it says, okay, maybe a little bit. And then, okay, well, here's a big effort that we're going to put into it. But now there's a sense of, okay, that's enough, and we're not really sure. What do you make of the position, the German position, the way it's evolved since the beginning of this crisis? Should Germany have responded more aggressively?
I don't think so, because nobody really knew where to go. And I think Merkel is still trying to make out where she can stop paying for the whole lot. So I think that her approach is understandable, but of course, from the outside, it looks very peculiar, because she always says no, and then again she helps a bit, and then again she says no, and again she goes further. So this is I think it's her style somehow, but it also helps maybe in the end preventing that we get the whole lot, like the bailout for each and everyone in the eurozone.
Obviously, Germany is trying to limit its exposure to the bad debt floating around, particularly in southern Europe. But at the same time, Germany has an interest in preserving the euro, and Germany, as a large exporter, benefits a great deal from the euro. Paul, how do you see Germany's position? Is this a legitimate position that Germany has taken vis-a-vis the euro?
Kind of. I think that the real convincing answer about what Germany and France should do about the eurozone, this is, I think they've said it in last January at Davos or after, I don't remember. Sarkozy and Merkel said, we will do anything to save the eurozone or the euro. So it should have been the discourse all the time. Unfortunately, for political reasons in Germany, once they said, yeah, maybe not that far, and then afterward they said they go farther than that. So the problem is that even that Germany is has a lot of difficulties to accept its new role after the reunification to be the big player in all this story, and say we don't want to pay, but the other ones are paying too. I mean, it's not that France is paying, the Netherlands, Finland, everybody is paying, even Spain. I mean, even the countries which have difficulties. So it's not only a problem of Germany, and we expect somehow that Germany has some ideas, not only to say we don't want to pay more.
The criticism of Chancellor Merkel, particularly, both domestically and internationally, it's been pretty tough. She's been under tremendous pressure to do more. Quentin, should she have done more at this point? Could she have done more?
I think that, yes, I think she probably should have moved faster. I think right at the beginning, when the Greek crisis broke, and we're going all the way back to February last year, she hesitated because she was adamant about two things. One, she wanted much tougher rules before she was prepared to put money on the table, which I think was absolutely right. But secondly, she was very nervous about how it would play in German domestic politics, and she delayed and delayed because there was a very important state election coming up several months later. In the end, it was an absolute disaster for Merkel because right on the cusp of that election, she had to suddenly sign an enormous cheque. So it didn't help. I think the problem for Frau Merkel is this. She's trying to deal with two things at once: short-term crisis, which is firefighting, and long-term rules which need to be set in place. No rules will be set in place that Germany doesn't accept. Germany finds it very difficult now to be the key power in Europe, without any question. Nothing can be done without Germany. It's actually very difficult for France to accept that France is very clearly in a subsidiary role.
It's interesting. A poll came out just less than a week ago in Germany gauging public opinion with respect to the German government's handling of the euro crisis. And the pretty negative altogether. I think here are the figures. 53% of Germans feel that the euro altogether has brought them disadvantages, and not quite half, but the majority of the respondents saying that that Chancellor Merkel's government has done a bad job of handling this crisis. One of the things that the German government said that they would not go with is eurobonds. Eurobonds were taken off the agenda for the Franco-German talks on Tuesday. It was already declared on Monday in Germany, okay, we're not going to be talking about eurobonds, but everybody else was talking about eurobonds. And one guy who has been pressuring the Chancellor to consider eurobonds is George Soros, the billionaire U.S. investor. Let's take a look at what he's been saying.
George Soros is among the wealthiest and most influential investors in the world. The American billionaire has been pressuring Germany to show more leadership in dealing with the European debt crisis. He believes Eurobonds could be part of a solution. He says Germany needs to establish fiscal rules. This should make the Eurobond acceptable to German voters. But what works for Germany can't work for the rest of Europe. Germany must propose rules that other countries can also follow.
Heike, you just wrote a piece in your paper entitled the Eurobond Illusion. Mm-hmm. What's illusory about Eurobonds?
I think some people have the idea that Eurobonds could help us out of this debt crisis. I have the opposite argument. I think they will sort of push us deeper in, because if you have Eurobonds, it's much easier to make more deficits because it's cheaper. The quality of the standard or the rating of the good German rating will be sort of lowered a little bit, and the ratings of the other countries will go up. So all in all, many of the poorer countries will pay less for their debt. So in the end, I think with Eurobonds we'll end up seeing more debt. And they also divert from the real problem, and the real problem is competitiveness of the economies. And Germany cannot solve the crisis with money and with Eurobonds. I think we have to solve the crisis via competitiveness of the countries at the Euro periphery. And how do you do it? You do it through economic reforms. Of course, this is a hard way to go, and it's a long way to go. But I think you will have to have some pressure again to do this. And I think if you start with Eurobonds, the pressure to start on economic reforms will be less. So this is a this is a way to get us more problems.
Well, it's interesting. At the press conference, there was the idea. Well, Eurobonds. No, it's not the time for Eurobonds. So maybe it'll be time for Eurobonds down the road. Is what the conclusion was there. That if you set the economic conditions, if you have maybe a common economic governance body within the eurozone, then you could develop a common European or eurozone debt instrument. Have we heard the last of Eurobonds?
I mean, for some months, I think so, because even France is not so. I mean, the French government is not so enthusiastic about it, because they could lose a little bit with the Eurobonds. But maybe one should have in mind that the Eurobonds could be a way to increase competitiveness in Europe if you have better infrastructure that you will pay with these Eurobonds and so on. The problem from my point of view is also to know what you will do with that money. Is this only to have a Eurobond to save Portugal and Greece, or is it to do something which could be useful for the European Union as such, not only for Greece? And if it could increase the competitiveness, it's a good thing. Like Jacques Delors, I think, as far as I remember, proposed in the early years, he didn't propose eurobonds to give normal spending for one country.
There's quite a bit of support coming from different places. Why are eurobonds so rejected by Germany?
It's very interesting because I think eurobonds will come inevitably. In fact, what we've already seen with these European rescue funds is, if you like, a sort of eurobonds light. The money that the European Financial Stability Facility raises is effectively a sort of eurobond. So I think it's going to happen. I think that there's very deep things in Germany. One is this deep dislike of excess government borrowing, this real fear that goes back into German history that this is what destroys a currency and destroys a government, and that the rules have therefore got to be very tough and have got to, and Heike put it very well from that perspective. The other thing is the internal German question. I mean, Germany in the last 20 years has paid a huge amount of money from west to east.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Quentin. I would love to pick that up, but we've got to wrap it up. We're simply out of time. I want to thank you all for being with us on the program. Heike Gerbeff, Paul Weber, and Quentin Peel. Do tune in again next week and check us out on the internet at dwworld.de.